Speaker, it might be a new Parliament and a new Prime Minister, but we're tackling the same old problems with the exact same fraught solutions. And we've heard a lot about that today. And what's worse is that the Liberal government can't even admit the failures that every single Canadian now, whether you voted for them or not, can see exist. So I'm going to cut right to it. This is a government that broke the Canadian immigration system. They broke the 100-year consensus of our system. And they have taken a system that was once the envy of the world, of so many people who have come here to call Canada home. It is a system now that is rife with abuse, with incompetence, and frankly, it's not a system that was that way 10 years ago. And any rational person would look at the vast majority, and the vast majority, frankly, of Canadians would say the exact same thing. The immigration system needs fixing. And you need something to restore the trust and integrity that it once had. But now we have an immigration minister who can't answer the most basic questions. In fact, there are members of on the other side of the House who spoke today, who probably read the legislation, who were in committee, that answered every single question better than she could. And I learned that firsthand last week. The Welcome to Canada, she couldn't tell you how many people we welcomed. She couldn't tell us whether they would ever complete proper security checks. She couldn't tell us who was going to leave, when they were going to leave, how they were going to do that. The Liberal government at this point is just, it seems like they're crossing their fingers. They're throwing anybody who hasn't been immigration minister yet into the fight and hope that the problems just go away. That doesn't make our country safe. It doesn't ensure that people can access health care. It doesn't give people the opportunity to find jobs. It doesn't help them find homes, and it doesn't keep the offenders or frankly, terrorists from entering our country. And you might have noticed that the most reasonable people in this country on immigration are no longer walking on eggshells about this issue. They've called it out for what it is. It is a deeply broken system that the government over the last 10 years broke. So here is what I've got to say to the 7 ministers in 10 years that added to the breaking of the system in Canada, the consensus that we once had in the system. This bill does not solve the problem that it was intended to solve. It actually creates more of them. And that's what we need to ensure that this House understands. Immigration levels have been far too high for the last number of years. I certainly think so. Municipal leaders think so. Provincial premiers think so. Even nonpartisan civil servants think so. They've said as much. So the proposed fix cannot be that 100,000 new citizens, or, well, maybe it's 100,000. The government doesn't even know the number. We've heard multiple estimates from multiple members on that side to become citizens with a stroke of a pen or a vote of this House. That is irresponsible. That is C-3 for you. Citizenship, even if you've hardly spent any time in this country, 36 months, and it doesn't have to be consecutive. That's the number one problem with it. And what about the security screenings? We haven't talked a lot about that in this House, the ones that the minister couldn't describe last week. She didn't even know what they entailed. So citizenship, like C-3 extends citizenship without the basic security checks, without a single background check, without a single interview. And what about the backlog in our system that we haven't talked much about? The one that has kept literally millions of people in line for years. The backlog of asylum claimants alone is nearly 300,000, a million for citizenship. C-3 would obviously add to that backlog, and there needs to be a concern. With a system that has lost all its integrity and lost the confidence of Canadians, we would want to ensure that the backlog isn't further it doesn't get worse. Our own budget watchdog tells us that it'll take $21 million, but he himself is handicapped on understanding this bill because they don't know the numbers of how many this would affect or how that would happen. Those are all secondary issue. But not only being far, far away from this country's needs on immigration, the bill is a big step in the wrong direction, and I think that it'll make the problems that the Liberals created over the last number of years worse. So nobody should be celebrating and I'll make this clear, nobody should be celebrating that our immigration system is broken. It has built this country. It has ensured that people like my parents can come here and flee the place that they don't even want to talk about anymore for a new life in Canada, where that first-generation child can become a member of Parliament, something that they would have never dreamed of. It is resilient, and it makes our country unique, and it is part of our cultural and economic strength. The country needs immigration, but it needs to work for Canadians and it needs to work for Canada. And right now it does neither of those things. It works for nobody. It doesn't work for the young people or the old, the first generation or the sixth generation, people who can't afford a home, people who can't get in to see a doctor when they need one, people who can't get a job when they have to, nor the people who have spent years languishing in lines waiting their turn without any idea of when any of this will actually happen. It doesn't help the people that were scammed by the fake colleges or the foreign cash-addicted universities that, under the watch and the encouragement of this government, have gotten out of control. And it doesn't serve the people who came here for the promise of this country. 40% of our newcomers already say that they want to leave. And so we can't pretend that using a hammer in this case is going to fix something that could be fixed with a scalpel. And based on this, it should come no surprise that despite promising a lower amount of newcomers, that the government is still issuing record numbers of permits. This year it's nearly 100,000 study permits and 50,000 temporary work permits. But this should be expected from an immigration minister who told this country before she was in this job, in her last job as the immigration minister for Nova Scotia, that she wanted absolutely no caps on immigration. And she denied that, but it's not a great track record to engender confidence in this new seventh minister in 10 years. But if the members opposite actually want to take an interest in making this better, I've got some advice to make it better. While we do need to fix the wrongs of the past, the former bill did that. And if there are elements and specific cases that it didn't, we could find ways to do it with a very targeted approach. We supported fixing the lost Canadians via the targeted bill that we saw from the Senate, from the other place, 245. But C-3 goes too far. The bill actually weakens Canadian citizenship. It devalues Canadian citizenship for everyone else. It opens the door by eliminating the ties to Canada as a requirement, or at least the strength of the ties to Canada as a requirement. It eliminates the first-generation limit. It grants citizenship to those born abroad with one parent who's just spent 1,095 consecutive days. We've heard a lot of conversation about this, and I'm glad to hear that now the members opposite, or the Liberals, are open to amendments to changing that, to actually substantiate it into a test that makes sense. They're not required to have substantial ties. And again, the vague substantial connection test allows, again, multi-generational foreign residents to claim citizenship with minimal presence in Canada. That devalues the citizenship. It devalues not only the rights that are afforded to every other citizen, but the responsibility that citizens have and become in making sure that they are citizens. I want to make the immigration system the envy of the world, and we can't do that if Canadians don't believe in the integrity of their system. They can't do that when you look out into the street today and you see what's happening in our streets and you say no to security vetting, to any kind of interview, to making sure that criminal record checks are conducted. You cannot possibly stand up today in this country and say that is not necessary. I look forward to hearing what their thoughts are on an amendment that would ensure that they take security and vetting seriously, something that they haven't done in our immigration system, something that has played out in our streets here in Canada, something that has shown case after case of people being charged before they committed a terrorist act in this country. I want to see a government do this responsibly, and I want to see citizenship mean something in this country. And I think this bill, without its amendments and the provisions that the government currently had, with the minister who knows nothing about the bill, who's presented it in the House, I want to see those changed, and I look forward to having having a conversation. But I look forward more to them accepting those amendments.
Questions and comments. Question et commentaires. The Chief Government Whip. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We've heard Conservative after Conservative get up and talk about a substantial connection. Yeah. You know, a lot of provinces have substantial connection rules too. For example, the province of Alberta says you can't run as an MLA unless you've had a substantial connection of at least 6 months. I'm curious if the member believes that Pierre Poilievre should have a substantial connection to Alberta before he runs as a member of Parliament in that province.
The member for Thornhill.
Look, I actually thought we were going to have a serious conversation on the bill, but clearly, maybe the member hasn't read the bill. But I assure you that he will seek the support of and the trust of the people of Battle River Crowfoot in a place that he grew up in a place that he was born in a place that he was raised in. And I look forward to him bashing down that member when he's back in September.
Comments, questions et commentaires. Le député de
The member for Rimouski-La Matapédia. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to congratulate my colleague on her speech. In the throne speech, the government said its priority was to restore the public's confidence in the immigration system. Does my colleague agree that this bill, which seems kind of minor, is that going to give Canadians their confidence back in the immigration system? What would she suggest as the priorities to get to the root causes of the problems with that department?
First and foremost is giving Canadians the confidence of an immigration minister who can answer a single question in this House, who knows a single thing about her portfolio, or that has even read the bill that she has presented in the House. That would be the first thing to engender confidence in an immigration system that this government has broken over the last 10 years. We used to have the best system in the world. It brought the best and the brightest to this country. That is no longer the case, and you don't have to hear it from me. You can go ask 10 Canadians in the streets if they think this system is broken, and they will tell you 10 out of times, yes.
Comments, questions et commentaires. The member for Edmonton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague from Thornhill for her wonderful speech on C-3. One of the issues we have with this government is the abject failure of minister after minister on the immigration file. We've seen it here today. When I'm looking at the departmental plans that just came out, late, of course, from this government, over the last 4 years, they have failed on over 50% of their metrics. Every single year, they're failing more than they're succeeding on achieving their goals. What if my colleague could provide some insight why this government is focusing on issues instead of fixing their problems in-house?
Honourable member.
Thank you for the question. I think that my honourable colleague from this side has spent exponentially more time looking at the immigration minister's website than the actual minister of immigration, who doesn't know the numbers, doesn't know the issues. The very fact that they've had 7 ministers in 10 years should tell you everything you need to know about how this government takes, or how seriously this issue, the government takes the issue of immigration. And for Canadians, to have a system that is so deeply broken from one that was the envy of the world for so many years is a travesty.
Questions and comments, questions et commentaires. La secrétaire parlementaire du ministre du Logement et de l'Infrastructure.
Merci beaucoup,
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd just like to understand from my colleague a bit more information about the security screenings that are to be done on citizens. In my case, there's a Canadian citizen in my riding who traveled abroad, and the child was born prematurely abroad. That citizen came back to Canada aged 5 and fleeing a regime. And so would a baby be denied medical care because they don't have Canadian citizenship yet? Would the security screening be on the parent or on the 5-year-old? Thank you.
The question from the member, and she knows the answer is of course not, and the question is frankly has nothing to do with what we're talking about here. The very idea that we can have a targeted approach for those who claim to be Canadian citizens, who have no connection, no substantial connection to this place, who are adults, who want to enjoy the responsibility of Canadian citizenship, that's what we're talking about. And the member opposite ought to know that.